Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ashley and I'm an architect in Ontario, and in this video we're going to be talking about writing the architect's exam. So perhaps you're thinking about writing the ExAC or the ARE and you're feeling overwhelmed about how to even approach and how to prepare for the exam. I've been there, I've written the exam, and I know the feeling. So I want to share some tips that I've learned in the process when I was preparing for the ExAC exam, and I'm going to be sharing them with you, so hopefully you feel less overwhelmed by the task at hand. So I'm going to be sharing 5 tips that can help you on preparing for the exam and feeling less overwhelmed. So if you're interested, let's get started. So let's talk about the 5 tips that helped me to feel a little less overwhelmed with the task of hand of preparing for the exam. Now, there's a lot of pressure, and I understand it completely, because when I was preparing for the exam too, you feel that pressure that you need to pass, you need to do well, and it can be very overwhelming. It's also overwhelming because there's so much ground that you need to cover. And if you're writing the ExAC, there's not a lot of resources and guides out there. If you are writing the ARE, the American-based exam, there's a lot of guides and resources out there that can help you and break the information into pieces. And I believe the ARE has been around a lot longer than ExAC, so that's probably why. And so I know the feeling. And also, if you're overwhelmed with so many resources, that too can be overwhelming as well. So I'm going to share some of the tips that helped me, and I know how you're feeling because I've been there too. And so this is what helped me, is breaking it down into steps. So step number 1, resources. So the first thing I would do is first understand what the exam is about. Understand the format, multiple choices, short answer, what exactly is the exam about? So really go onto the website if you're writing the ExAC or the ARE and understand the format. Really study that website and look at all the resources that they recommend you to study. Start to gather all that information and put it together in a table or a chart, or write it down in a Word document and list all those resources. I did this myself and I found it very helpful to just visually see how many books I'm looking at, what books people are recommending, and I've recommended a few as well in a previous video, so you can check out what I would recommend as well. And then look at those books that you need to go through and the resources recommended, and then start to get into what the exam is about as well. And so start to see, I know for ExAC, there are some sample questions, and that starts to give you a bit of a flavor of what the test is about. And then that's gonna help you with the next few steps of what I would recommend in terms of preparing. Now for me, preparation is everything to keep myself calm and focused. So you have to prepare. This is not one of those exams that you can just show up and that's it. Especially if you don't have a lot of experience. If you are a young intern architect and you only have, let's say, I would say under 10 years, that's not a lot of experience in the industry to fully pass the test without studying. And even so, I would still recommend, if you had the experience, to spend the time studying, because practice and the books are a little bit different. So it is important to have a refresher of the material prior to doing so. So understand your resources. You need the building code. What exactly do you need for this test? Write that down. Write down the books that you're looking at that you should be reading. Write down the articles, the building code if that's necessary, and so on. And then once you understand the resources, you may need to develop a plan of action to get those resources. I remember I didn't have the National Building Code, so I had to order a lot of the materials. If there are particular books that you should be reading, you're gonna have to order those as well. So start to gather those resources together and write down a list of what those resources are. Number 2, develop a study plan. You need a plan. I always feel when I have a plan, a study plan, it allows me to stay calm and stay stress-free so that I don't start panicking, because usually I find if I'm panicking, it's because I didn't have a plan and I'm not following a plan and it's just very loose. You can't. You need to have a strict plan at hand so that you can stay calm, and you need time to do this. You cannot just leave 1 month toward the exam and plan something. I feel like that's not enough time to collect the books, to collect everything, and then develop a study plan. That's going to be very difficult to do so. So I do think you need to give yourself time, give yourself a week to plan and collect the resources that you need, do that research, and then start to look at your calendar. Start to make a realistic plan. I'm saying realistic. I myself sometimes can be very unrealistic and ambitious, but you need to have a conversation with yourself and say, is it realistic for me to study after, if you are, for example, working full-time, is it realistic for you to be studying every day after work? For me, I asked myself that question when I was preparing for the exam, and I said, no. I am tired after work, and a lot of times I have deadlines and so on, and I'm not going to be studying really well or very attentive if I'm studying after work. I'm tired. I'm not going to be retaining the information the same if I had a fresh mind and if I'm rested. So I knew for myself that I only had the weekends to plan, to really study. And my style of studying, and this is the other thing, you have to understand yourself and what works better for yourself, is to work long stretches. I really prefer, because once I get into something, I really dive in and I really study and I really get into my studying and I look up things, and I just love to spend and dive into a particular topic and explore that topic and get all my questions answered and so on. So in that case, for me to study after work for 2 to 3 hours wouldn't do it for myself. And once I'm into the mode of studying, then I like to go for a long stretch. So I knew that the only time that I had to do that was on the weekends. So knowing that that was a time allocated available for me to study, I made an action plan. I also started to think about, where do I study best? Your environment, the location, what makes you study and learn best? For me, studying at home for such a test would be a problem. There are too many distractions at home, and when I'm at home, I want to relax. I'll have a cup of coffee or tea, and then I get distracted with other things, and then I look at the time and it's already evening and it's time to go to sleep. So that I knew wouldn't work. So for me, I needed to go to the library, and that's how I started to do that. I got up, I would get ready and go to the library and be around other people that were also studying for other tests and so on. So I would find a spot in the library and I would be there until it closed. All right, and I would go out for a break, and then I would just stay there for the full day, for the full weekend. And I did this for a while, a few months of time. So I gave myself a year to prepare, and I do recommend a year. It's a nice amount of time so that you don't feel too pressured and you have enough time to go through all the content as well. And so I knew I had the weekends, and so what I did is I started to look at the list of resources that I had, and I started to look at the objectives for the exam. So ExAC, they clearly list what are the objectives of the exam, what you need to study and prepare for. You need to understand the building code, fire exits, fire safety, and so on. You need to understand those concepts. And so I went through all the objectives and I said, okay, this weekend, I'm gonna go through the following objectives laid out in the objectives of exam. And with that, I looked at the resources that best corresponded to that objective. And so I started to look at, okay, for the building code, of course I need the building code. That's really what I needed to understand. And I also had a few lectures or a webinar. And so I started to plan, okay, that webinar is happening, let's say in October. I'm gonna make sure that I read through the building code, went through the objectives prior to that webinar so that I have some understanding of it. And if I have questions, I know that I can bring it up at that lecture or that webinar that I'm attending, which the RAIC had offered at that time, and it was excellent. So I would tailor my resources accordingly. And so if there was a lecture that I found that would be helpful, I would do the same. If there's an article, I would take those articles, take the Construction Illustrated, and then I would tailor it with the objectives and then develop a plan of dividing those chunks of objectives into my calendar. So 1 month I would maybe go through one section, and then the next month I would go through another section of the objectives. And so I would lay that out on the span of time. So if it was a year, or maybe it was a little less than a year, but it was close to a year, I would take that and then I would plan all that out. And then I would leave some flexibility because things come up, life happens. So you don't want to be too strict, and you don't want to also overdo it and say, I'm going to be doing 2 objectives, 2 sections, when that's a lot for a weekend, right? So I was very realistic, and I allowed myself some grace period. So if there was a time that I got sick, then I had, I think I left myself a month that I had some time that I could take away from in order to give myself a little bit of flexibility with the schedule. The other thing I did is I left some time toward the end, close to the exam, for reviewing. Now, weeks leading up to the exam, that's typically when you start to get very nervous. This is natural, we're all human, and that's when you start to get a little nervous, you start to question yourself, are you ready for this? And you know what? The answer is you're never ready. You gotta go do it, you gotta go for it, and you're never gonna feel ready. I didn't feel ready, and I studied quite a bit. You're never gonna be ready. You're never gonna feel ready. So you just need to go for it. And so I left a few weeks prior to the exam to give myself some time to also relax and let that information sink, and then to give myself some time to just review. And I created some cheat sheets in the process when I was studying so that I can review key concepts that I felt was very important to know. And so you can have some summary sheets that you would review prior to the exam. And this made me feel, it gave me some confidence, and it gave me a little less stress, knowing that I was prepared, I did everything I can, and the rest, we'll see what happens. I can't control the questions on the exam, I can't control that, but I can control the time I put into the preparation and doing my best to prepare for the exam. And I kept telling myself that, and that really helped me to keep myself calm and stress-free for the exam. Number 3, understand how to study. Do some research while you're gathering all that information as well, and understand how to study better. I feel like when you're in university, no one actually talks about this. What is the best way to study? There is research and science behind what is the best way to study, how do we retain information best, and so on. This is one of the tips that I wish I did when I was preparing, is that I actually did some research on what are the effective ways to study best. I knew for myself, I knew some of my behaviors, so I knew that for me, studying longer periods of time, like taking the weekend and doing the bigger chunks, was better for me and more effective, because once I get into something, I like to go through and read everything, and I have a lot of fun and I enjoy it too. So I get kind of lost in the topic, which I enjoy doing, and I know that the shorter periods of times after work wouldn't work for me. But everyone's different, so you need to understand not only your behavior, what works well for you, if going to a library, studying outside is good, but also take the time to study and see what are some of the effective ways to retain information. Now, I think it's also important to note that I don't know so much about the ARE, but for the ExAC, it's not about memorization. It's more about having an understanding about the topics. And so they're looking for a comprehensive understanding. Not necessarily you need to memorize the whole building code, for example. So that's just not realistic. And that when you are working in the real world, you have a lot of these resources at hand that you go and reference, but the idea is that you understand the overall concept and what's going on, and you understand how to use a building code and so on. So those are the fundamentals. So understanding that and then looking at effective ways of studying could also be very helpful. That's one thing I wish I did when I was preparing. Number 4, and this is one that we all tend to forget, is you need to take care of yourself. This, again, is not a race. You have to remember to sleep, drink water, eat healthy, and not just get so bottled into your studying that you forget to even take breaks and so on. Now, we are all guilty of this. I'm included in this. I tend to forget to take breaks, and that's not good too because you're not being effective in your studying. A lot of times when I was studying, I would stop for a minute. I'm like, am I retaining this information? Probably not if I've been studying for 5-6 hours in a row. So I then remind myself I need to go take a break, I need to get a snack, I need to drink some water, and then get back to it. And another really important thing is you need to get sleep. You need to sleep because I find that if you're not sleeping, it's hard to retain that information as well. So make sure you're sleeping at a regular schedule, you're sleeping at least 8 hours at a time, and you're getting that regular sleep as well. That is very important in your preparation as well. Number 5, stay calm and focused. Just remind yourself, you can only control your input, you can't control the output or the results of the exam, but you can control what you're gonna do, how you're gonna prepare for the exam, and how much time you're gonna allocate for that. That you can control. Don't worry about the results. I think a lot of times we tend to just worry, I need to pass, I need to pass. And you forget the most important part to pass is to prepare and just focus on that process and the steps that you need to do to get there. But don't focus so much on those results. It's just gonna add pressure, and you don't need any more pressure because there's a lot of content you need to go through, and you don't need to worry about that at this point. Give yourself the time to study and just stay calm, and just remember, if you have a plan, it's gonna be all right. You're gonna go through the content, you're gonna retain that information, and the rest is gonna be fine. But if you're gonna panic and stress out and just start to feel too overwhelmed, it's gonna almost stop you. You're gonna feel incapable of studying as well. And I know that feeling as well, moments where you get really overwhelmed, and it's not helpful. You just need to take a moment, just stop, and just remind yourself that don't worry about those results. Just have fun, enjoy the process of studying, and remember, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event as well. It's not something that I don't think anyone ever enjoys writing a test. I don't enjoy writing tests as well, but just think that this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Enjoy that time you're taking to studying, and go to a place that you enjoy to be when you go study, so it makes it a lot more fun. If there's a favorite drink that you like to have, a coffee or tea, give yourself those comforts to allow you to have fun in that process. And stay calm, just don't worry. Everything's gonna be all right, and have fun in the process as well. I hope this was helpful. If it was, make sure to like the video. And if you'd like to support the channel, make sure to subscribe, and you can do that here. And if you'd like to see more information about the resources, books, and other resources that I would recommend for the ExAC exam, I would check out this video here. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Until then, bye.